I actually think we're undervaluing live sports right now. Yeah. I mean, and the specialness around it, the meaning of sports in our society, so particularly, when you're in divisive times, and then certainly globally with a sport like the NBA.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SBJ's On Stage. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom, and I'm eager to bring you this conversation with NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. This conversation took place on April 22nd at the CAA World Congress of Sports, presented by Sports Business Journal. This is a lively and insightful conversation with Silver being interviewed by ESPN and ABC analyst Bob Myers. Myers is the architect behind the Golden State Warriors' 4 NBA championships and is a 2-time NBA Executive of the Year. He brings a unique perspective from his time in front office leadership and his time as a NBA TV analyst. They dive into everything from how the NBA is navigating challenges around local media rights and franchise valuations to the league's evolving approach to collective bargaining and player relations. It's a revealing look at how one of the most powerful voices in sports sees the future of the NBA. Let's go on stage.
So thanks, Adam. Appreciate you coming here.
It's great to be in Nashville.
Yeah, I love this city. It's really cool. Really cool. Okay, I'm going to be unconventional here for 1 second.
Yeah.
I've known Adam a long time, and I just want to thank you for being so decent to me while I was an agent, while I was in the NBA. For somebody in the position of power, I find that your ability to listen and just be decent is so unique. And that's who Adam, if you don't know Adam, he has obviously a huge job, but he always takes the time, he certainly did with me, and whatever decisions you make, I find that your moral compass and your integrity is off the charts. So I just wanted to tell you that first.
Thanks.
So this is not going to be like some hard-charging interview, just so you know. So if you want that, that's not going to happen. But Adam, what do you, your pub, people know, obviously, you're, I don't know, I want to say famous, but recognizable for sure. What question do you get the most out there in society? What are people asking you?
People ask me the most, I think, just sort of randomly about expansion.
Really?
I think when I travel, I think that's always seems to be on people's minds, especially most recently because I had said publicly several times that we wanted to get a new CBA, we wanted to get new media deals, and that we'd turn to expansion after that. And I think, for example, just for the Sonics for Seattle, I'm looking at Rick Welts, there's this strong base of fans who've been waiting, were never happy that the team left, understood it did. There's a, rebuilt arena there and desperately want to get a team back. I think Vegas is in the mix too, a few other cities out there. But, that's generally a question I get a lot. I think, in the old days, we used to get more questions about officiating. No, and I'd only say that I think because there's so much more transparency around officiating, people talk about it. I think people have other outlets other than the commissioner, but obviously it's on people's minds, on any given day. I think more of an industry issue, I think, for this room. People are asking me a lot about local media, just because there's so much disruption there right now. You have roughly 2/3, just speaking for our league, 2/3 of the NBA teams are operating with RSNs that just came out of bankruptcy, or some that were completely defunct, a few others that are struggling. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty there, but we can talk about that if you want. I think we'll work through that. And then just thinking what else, we've been talking a lot about international expansion lately. We announced that we were...
On that point, by the way, when you're at a game, they're not asking, they're yelling at you about the officials when you sit at the games? Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So if there's a bad call, you get yelled at, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because you're supposed to officiate the game from your seat too, right? Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. So expansion, right? I don't know, I'll say it for myself. The emphasis on Europe caught me off guard a little bit because I thought domestic was maybe going to come first or get more of a focus. Am I reading that wrong, or they're kind of parallel, or?
Well, I'd say it's more parallel. I think there's domestic expansion, so just start there. We will turn to that. It's not a foregone conclusion. I said this many times, but I think there is a sense from people outside the industry, not people in this room, that sometimes with expansion you're printing money. And why wouldn't you just print more money and divide it? Of course, you're not. You're selling equity in the league. So we have 30 teams in the NBA, and if we expand by 32, I mean, at least one of the reasons we wanted to have the media deals done, and they're done for the next 11 years, is to the extent you're giving up a portion of your media deal, you want to know what that number is. And also, it's a little unusual because certain kinds of transactions, you're selling an asset and it's sort of good luck.
Yeah.
And off you go, somebody got a good deal or not. Now you're selling an asset to somebody who's now going to be your partner.
Yeah.
It's going to be involved in potentially revenue sharing with the league, a new CBA, expansion, further expansion. So on one hand, of course, you want to maximize value for the existing partners, but you also want to put that putative owner in a positive position where, just like the other teams in the league, if they have a well-managed franchise, they have an opportunity both to win and to potentially make money that they can then reinvest over time in the franchise. So we're beginning internally that analysis. We have a board meeting in July. I'm sure we'll talk about it then, more then. But I think it's not an obvious decision. Again, I think we got to look at the markets, look at the arena situations, all the components that would potentially go into. It's called domestic expansion, or it's not. Vancouver's interested, right. So it's North American expansion, but it's of the NBA. Europe sort of put that in a different category. So, you well know, roughly getting close to a third of the players in the NBA are born outside the United States. Half of those are European. So call it 15% of the players are European. And if you look at, for example, our MVPs, we're now 6 of the last MVPs, some repeats, but have been international players. And incidentally, we announced already the 3 finalists for this year's MVP. Again, 3 non-American players. So there's an amazing amount of basketball happening globally. Basketball is probably the number 2 sport in the world. My only hesitation, it's soccer's 1, cricket's possibly could be 2, but call basketball the number 2 sport in the world. Certainly the fastest growing sport in the world. Young fan base, diverse fan base, interests in Asia, clearly Europe, Latin America. So tremendous opportunities to continue growing the game. We used the opportunity when we were over in France for the Olympics, Mark Tatum and I, Deputy Commissioner, to have more intensive meetings. Again, more talking to various stakeholders, media companies, advertising agents, many of the kinds of people in this room, to get a sense of what they thought the opportunity. And what came back was sort of really a lot of positive receptivity to a basketball league that was somewhat different from what exists there now.
Yeah.
So there's country leagues, and then there's a pan-European league called the EuroLeague. I think the sense I was getting back is, and it's interesting when people are talking about your own brand, that the NBA in Europe is a little different than other sports brands in that there's an entertainment component, music, fashion, culture, all the things that we know are associated with the NBA. And by the way, increasingly the WNBA too. It's sort of a 2-league conversation. And interest there, so not only Norm's interest in the game of basketball, but in the sort of the entertainment style sport league that we could potentially bring to Europe. And then so we had those conversations, then we played some regular season games in January over in Paris, used that opportunity as well to continue those discussions. And then, again, all this, most recently at our board meeting, we didn't take a vote or anything, but we took the pulse of NBA ownership and said, is this something that you want us to continue to explore? And the response was overwhelmingly positive. And so that's the process we're in now. Again, just to be clear, this would be a standalone league. It wouldn't be a division of the NBA. Maybe one day, some of these teams could be a division of the NBA. I'm always reading about new supersonic air jets jets that are coming online. I think that could dramatically change things. A faster flight, well from a team standpoint, that impact their travel, time zones, et cetera. But we're seriously looking at this now. The outline is roughly 16-team league to start, potentially 12. Europe has open leagues. We have closed leagues in the United States, so it'd be a hybrid, maybe 12 permanent members, 4 that could play in on a yearly basis, major European cities. And if you think about it, the opportunity in sports, and I can tell already from the incoming, even though we haven't started a process yet, the notion that you could own the NBA European franchise in Paris or London or Berlin or Barcelona or Madrid. tremendous interest out there in doing something like that. And then, I mean, lots of issues to work through, some of which I'd love to talk to you about. For example, how does the competition work in terms of the NBA? How do players come into the NBA if they begin?
Just money, Adam, just money.
Yeah.
Players want money. No.
But just the last thing I'll say
I know.
is that I anticipate that the best players will still play in the NBA, in part because the money will continue to be that much greater. But I would just say, to compliment European basketball, not only are they doing an incredible job developing top-tier players, but the EuroLeague is great competition. You can speak this better than I. It's a kind of slightly different style basketball than the
Olympics,
NBA.
You know, I'm sure a lot of you watched the Olympics. I don't know what the ratings were on that gold medal game, but that seemed to
22 million people.
Yeah, I mean, and just for context, the NBA Finals is what ranges from 12 to that range.
You know, half that or maybe
half that,
a little better.
half that. So yeah, I mean, it's a totally different style. I like the style, but it's different. But I think certainly it appealed. Obviously, you're playing for your country too, made the Olympics so great. But on your, you got a white. You probably don't do it. But like on your, I've seen you got you have your little notebook that you have. What's top of the list right now? Top of mind for, is it these things or is it something else?
It is these things. I think, honestly, the very top of mind is local media. I mean, we have an immediate, because we have an immediate issue. I've just, in round numbers, you know, we take in, you know, a 25% hit collectively. For some teams, it's around a 50% reduction. Now, it's balanced against new national media deals, which kick in next year, but you obviously don't, I mean, economically, of course, you don't want to go down. But just as importantly, we want to reach our fans with our games. I mean, just to give you the magnitude of the numbers, I mean, one of the benefits of having so many games, you have an enormous amount of content to put out there in the marketplace. The local media opportunity represents about 2,200 games that are potentially available. And so there's the economics, but maybe more importantly, especially we have a very young fan base, which of course you want to reach. And to the extent that those games are still almost, you could say, trapped, I don't hate to make it so negative, but are caught in legacy media, which is rapidly declining. And our young fans in particular, you know, we used to talk about cord cutters, they're really cord nevers. It's not part of their lives to buy cable. And you know, I know Bob Iger and Jimmy Patero talking later this afternoon. I'm sure they'll be talking about their imminent direct-to-consumer service. But live sports are essentially holding together the existing bundle right now. And so the local situation, by definition, will then get even worse. And the question is, on the other hand, and this is where I'm really optimistic, it's a problem to solve, but I think, look what just happened with our national deals and the opportunities now, what Disney, ESPN's doing, Comcast and Amazon, that through streaming technology, not only will it be easier to reach people because over time, all the clunkiness of authentication, everything will go away. You're holding a TV in your hand right now.
I got to ask you.
And I have one in my pocket. And so it'll be easier to get live games, so that will be part of it. But the part that even excites me more, which doesn't get enough discussion, and I've said this before, if you think now of NBC taking a game from, or you know, Comcast from NBC to Peacock, you could say it's largely the same game, production-wise, and then people say, are people going to be able to find it? Are they going to be able to you know, work through the switching to cable to Apple TV, whatever it is, to Roku. And the fact is, we see now from the numbers, people do find those games.
I was going to ask you, these playoffs, the last week have been tremendous success. I mean, Mike Bass sent it over to me. It was the biggest weekend since 2003, which is hard to fathom. Viewership numbers are up. 8 games averaged 4.4 million viewers. Celtics Magic was 6.7.
You may want to verify those if they're from.
Well, I don't know, Mike. I mean, is he? Yeah, I guess this is.
No, but it was.
I suppose that's true.
The highest rated opening week in 25 years. Just leave it at that.
Okay.
But so the numbers are fantastic.
I think I kind of said
that. What? I just to finish the thought again. What really excites me is that when you move to a digital world, you can do all kinds of things with those telecasts that you can't through traditional television. And again, people in this room are very focused on it, but user-generated content, merchandising, collectibles, ticket sales, betting, gaming, multiple video feeds, unlimited audio fields. I say, think of the Manning cast, but on steroids. Essentially unlimited numbers of alternative channels that you're a hardcore X's and O's fan and they want somebody like you to be explaining, all right, why is New York struggling tonight? Like, what is happening on the floor other than, the other side wants it more kind of stuff. It's like really get into the fine points of the game. But there's other people who are new to the game, want the game explained. Like, what does it mean to foul out? What is a block? And then there's another group who are truly casual fans and want to be entertained in the way the Manning brothers or whatever like that. Like, all of that is going to become available. Disney's investing an enormous amount in that. I'm sure you're going to hear this afternoon, as is Comcast, as is Amazon. So I'm particularly excited about that ability to create a more engaging experience. Like, look, that to me, in fact, I love conferences like this to really focus on our industry because I actually think we're undervaluing live sports right now. I mean, and the specialness around it, the meaning of sports in our society, so particularly, when you're in divisive times, and then certainly globally with a sport like the NBA. And so there's this enormous opportunity now. And again, you're seeing all parts of it because you're on air now, and with that way to communicate with fans, to create more engagement, to get more sophisticated. What content causes fans to tune out? What enables them or incentivizes them to stay longer in a telecast?
What just taking the game of the NBA, I find these I'm more engaged in these playoffs than I've just as a fan. Maybe that's because I'm not killing myself watching the Warriors, but I find this. I don't know if it's the parity or the way the game is settled. I know a lot of people talk about things they change. We could say that about any sport. Do you like where it's? Do you feel good about where it is?
I do, and I may have even been a bit too defensive about the three-point shooting early in the season. I live in the world. I listen to what people say. I listen to what your colleagues say on air. I read as much as I can.
Stephen A?
Them all. And remember, we were in San Francisco for All-Star, and Bob Costas interviewed Steve Kerr. And sometimes that validation from people around the game, like Steve, like you. And, Steve made his career as a three-point shooter. Obviously, Steph changed the game under your and Steve's direction. And, Steve's response is, I love where the game is. And I don't think it's being defensive to say we spend a lot of time looking at the data, the numbers. You're aware of that. And if we want to tweak it at some point in terms of three-point shooting, maybe. But on the other hand, think of the skill level. And you should speak to this, of the big men now. And I think when you look at the data, what is lost on a lot of people, I think including the commentators, if you look back 30 years ago, we have essentially the same percentage of shots in the paint now as we did then. What you're seeing is long twos are being converted to threes. Now, that's a harder shot. Now, I get people, I think the bigger issue is diversity in offenses. People want, I think it's kind of cool in a way watching the Knicks Pistons last night, a little bit of return of the bad boys. I think brands are important of teams having thematics, having a particular culture that's theirs as opposed to sort of a cookie cutter offense around the league. I think that brings excitement to fans. But, to answer your question, I think there's a reason we're having these incredible ratings, over the opening weekend. The competition ultimately is what drives people. There's clearly a step up when you get to the playoffs in the NBA. It's like no secret. We have a long regular season. It's meaningful because where teams position themselves for playoffs to get into the playoffs and where they're positioned, who they play, becomes meaningful. But even and the Clippers-Nuggets game, it's for those who stayed up. It's an hour earlier here, so it's a little earlier to stay up, and it was another incredible finish last night. So, could it be improved at some point? Yeah, I think too from your involvement with the league, we are good listeners, and to the extent whether our teams are telling us, our fans are telling us we need to make changes, we've played around with changing the format at the end of the game where people thought there were too many stoppages. We've done a bunch of things around there. But I just look at the skill level of the players on the floor, and I think it's sometimes lost on sort of some people who, I get it, it's like, I'm not doing a good job then selling to them the attributes of this game because it's frustrating to hear
what do you mean?
Some of the
people what are they saying?
I think it was the shorthand of too much three-point shooting or whatever. I just think when you watch these games, when you see the skill level, involved in the shots that these players are taking, I get it. On any given game, there's, when I hear in my head sometimes a commentator saying, and he settled for a three-point shot, right? If somebody says that, by definition,
which is, it's fascinating to see. You talk about Curry. This pushback, and I don't. Maybe it is an overreaction because I don't hear it maybe as much, and I understand you have to be more sensitive to that noise. It's fascinating to me that the one most popular player in the league, one of them, certainly Curry, made his whole being on three-point shooting. And that's why people watch, because he makes three-point shots. It's not for any other reason.
And look at Caitlin Clark, by the way.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's like, is she going to pull up from the logo and hit a half-court shot?
And you watch young kids play, and that's what they're doing. Yeah. So it's about this. And
it's more of an equalizer, by the way. I just want to throw that out too, because when there's a premium on shooting, and you'll see in our league, it's allowed more smaller. They're like conventional standards. They're big people. Yeah. But you can, you have players, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", who are MVP quality players because of the premium shooting, which is an equalizer in a way for the game.
And it wasn't before.
And to us, if you're the league, it's amazing. As every inch you go up, you become more rare on the planet. I think sometimes when you're around the NBA, you don't realize how unique a 7-footer is on the planet. Yeah. And when you have 6'2", 6'3", I mean, for every inch you go down to the mean, millions of more players potentially are out there who are part of that pool who can make the NBA. And by the way, everything I'm saying about the NBA, I could be saying about the WNBA too, because we're tremendous growth there as well.
You've been labeled, I don't know how you feel about it. I don't know that it's good or bad. Adams, player empowerment. He's a loud player. By your reaction right there, I don't think you love that label. By the way, I don't even know if it's a bad label. Let me give you I want to hear your thoughts. But this idea that players, you hear that connotate, player empowerment. I look at it like talent is scarce, and when talent has leverage, they use that leverage. I don't know that it's good or bad. That's life. If you're making a movie and it's Top Gun 2, Tom Cruise has a lot of juice there. Can't make the movie without him. He may not want to come out of the trailer. He may be difficult, but he's in charge. I viewed that always when I was managing a team. There's a reason why the players do have power. You know why? There's not many of them that move the needle. And so now you get sometimes blamed when that power is abused or misused. Do you feel that, or are you kind of like, look, I don't decide this stuff.
You know me well. I feel everything. I can't. I'm not one of these guys like I don't read anything. I don't look at the comments. Right. I read it. I look at it. I feel it, and all that. I think you should if you're in one of these jobs. So I guess I cringed when you said player empowerment, because generally the way it's used by commentators around me is in a negative context. And I would only say, put the label aside. I guess if you want to say, do I believe in player rights? Yes. Do I believe that players should have a strong union? Yes. It's actually helpful to running our league. I mean, look what's happening in college right now. I think they'd love to have a strong group of players who could come together and set terms. We could have a whole long discussion about the breakdown. I don't know football as well, but certainly in college basketball, the NIL collective system, sort of what the transfer portal's become and everything. And to me, they need to step out and create a structure around that. So I personally don't mind a notion of player empowerment, although it's also my job to have a balanced league, one where teams have their rights as well. And I've made this point many times. So on one hand, through collective bargaining process, fine for players to be empowered, fine for them to negotiate for great deals and everything else. But of course, then the negative side of it is if that player empowerment comes to mean that players aren't living up to their deals, players are forcing trades, players are saying they're not going to live under whatever their contract. And you've dealt with situations like that. And by the way, I think part of the frustration, they're certainly not new. No. You could go back in the history of the NBA. To your point, talent's always going to have power. Yeah. And sometimes what I'm pointing out to even people within the league, it's that it's not always just a function of the rules. Talent has power, and the question is, how do you build mutual respect and then demonstrate over time? And incidentally, it's wonderful, your good friend Andre Iguodala, to have him now as the executive director of the Players Association, to have him as my partner there, because I think he's able to see both sides. Yeah. And so part of player empowerment, it's some of a particular player exercising power or trying to, that's outside the scope of the agreement, there's also downside to the other players. A player you recruit a player to a team, player thinks he's going to be part of a certain team, that guy I'm coming to play with, he's got 3 years left on his deal. All of a sudden, that player's trying to push himself out of that deal. The other player's saying, well, wait a second. I just assumed he was going to honor his contract.
Sure.
Any sort of disruption on a team. It's why you're so good at what you do. It's not just a collection of individuals. What makes this sport, I think, so spectacular is on one hand, you have these unique individuals, unique people on the planet, where if you don't have one of a select group of players, it's very hard to excel at the highest level. On the other hand, the magic is getting them all together to work as a unit.
And I think that's interesting. I always, an analogy I like to use was when I was doing it, you're kind of managing a rock band. Sometimes the guitar player doesn't want to go up on stage. And you go, you gotta get up there. Like, we pay you to be up there on stage. I don't want to fucking go up there tonight. I don't want to play that song. And you go, listen, I know, but we need you up there. Or the lead singer, I'm not getting enough. Put me in the front of that. I don't need these other people on my cover. But that is part of the job, especially in the NBA. I think if you mention the NFL, I think the only equivalent is an NFL quarterback, right? But because there's many more players in the NFL, and they don't play both sides of the ball. They play one side of the ball. And so when you talk about player empowerment, there's a reason, like we said, there's a reason. Now, I'm sure you'd love them all to behave, all players and anybody to behave perfectly, but that's not life. That's not in any industry. That's not an industry. As far as players changing teams, right? I grew up, you grew up. You buy a Knicks jersey. I don't know if you grew up. Is it okay to say you grew up? Is that right? Okay.
I grew up a Knicks fan.
Okay, you grew up a Knicks fan. I just didn't want to. You probably, I don't know if you're the type of kid that got a jersey, but you probably had a favorite player. He probably was on the team for a little while, right? 6, 7, I don't know who it was, if you want to say.
I had a few favorites.
Okay, a few guys, but they stuck around, right? You'd show up.
Walt Frazier, he still works for them.
Yeah, still works for him. Is it matter one way or the other, or do you agree or disagree with this, that nowadays, you buy a jersey, it's kind of buyer beware, that it might be 2, 3 years, and is that good, bad, neutral?
And
you even believe it's true?
I would just say it ultimately, to me, it's become neutral. I would say fans are very sophisticated. And I think it's to say buyer beware. I think you have sophisticated buyers. I don't think somebody's buying a jersey of a player and saying, oh my God, I can't believe he moved a few years later. I don't think, and people like to collect them and everything else. It's a different world. I would only say, you try to find the right balance. On one hand, when I got to the league, you still were on the tail end of some players had 25-year contracts.
Yeah.
And especially in a cap system, it's what used to be referred to in the system as dead money.
Yeah.
You paid a player a certain amount of money because you knew you had to. They had the leverage, no different in those days, knowing that there was no way towards the end of, put aside 25 years, called a 9-year contract, which were very common. You kind of knew statistically you were paying a player for 5 years, and for 4 years, that was going to be sort of dead money at the end of your bench because it was going to, it's going to hold your team back because that player was going to be taking a sort of disproportionate share of your cap as opposed to being able to rebuild your team. And I think the benefit of shorter contracts, so I'll talk about the benefit then the detriment. So the benefit is that it closer aligns pay for performance, which I think is great for every industry, that a guy is a new, and that's no knock on the players, it's just you look to align incentives. And so to the extent that you've got new contracts coming up, and by the way, it's also, I think, healthier for the team relationship because you're not locked in perpetually. It's sort of after you go through the rookie scale and then you get free agent contract, if you want to move at the time you're a free agent, that to me is not player empowerment. No. That's where the term, it's like, okay, I'm a free agent. Yeah. That I have my right. There's incentives to stay. You can make more money staying for your current team. But so I think from that standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, it's been positive. On the other hand, sure, like growing up in a time when you say Magic Johnson, Lakers, Larry Bird, Celtics, Michael Jordan, Bulls, yes, there's a lot of benefit to that. But so I also think that when you think of those associations, I don't think it's an accident those were bigger markets. I mean, one of the first questions you said to me was, is this parity better? And I think absolutely. When you see the competition in the playoffs, the fact now that, it was only a few years ago, I think that I think somebody on the stage would have been asking me, well, how do you feel about the fact that, the team with the best record in the West, best team in the East, Oklahoma City and Cleveland were small markets. It's not even part of the conversation right
Well,
now.
it's certainly not in the internet. That's what I always find fascinating. Nobody's talking about Green Bay Packers.
It's like Oklahoma City,
or
what an
Detroit
incredibly well-run
Lions.
team. Look at the job they've done. They're off and they're competing in the playoffs. There's no sense in the league
And
office
that's healthy.
it's
That's
incredibly
healthy.
healthy.
That's
And I think, and it's also healthy as a 30-team league, that a player, so he gets drafted by a team and then doesn't think, all right, how long do I have to be here before I move? Because economically, if I'm in one of these other markets, and the fact is, in a global market now for the NBA, the incremental difference between 1 million people from one city to another is really insignificant when you have a social media community of 2 billion people globally following the NBA.
Last question, because I'm trying to be a good person and do the time. Let's pretend however many years from now, this is me interviewing you as you leave your job. What do you want the legacy? I don't even like that word. What do you want? What do you hope is said? Adam did.
Yeah, honestly, not personal, not about a legacy. What I hope is said just about the league during the period in which I will have been commissioner is that we took full advantage of the global opportunity. I mean, I think that's where there's a really unique opportunity for the NBA. I mean, I look at NFL's killing it, baseball's, America's pastime, the NHL's doing a fantastic job. I think where the NBA has a truly unique opportunity, and when I say NBA, I mean WNBA too, we operate our leagues together, is basketball, fastest growing sport in the world, number 2 sport in the world. And just as we talked about earlier, the opportunities in Europe and Asia, we're doing more in India, Africa, where we created a league. I mean, during the pandemic and it's still going strong. I just think that sometimes, and it's a balance with NBA owners, some are here as to how much we should be reinvesting in the business at any given time, or how much we should be borrowing, how much in terms of we should be selling equity, like potentially we will in NBA Europe. But I'm concerned sometimes that people will look back on this era and say, why didn't you do more? You're one of the biggest brands in the world. You have this opportunity. There's nothing like this, premium elite sports, the NBA brand, and WNBA resonate in such unique ways. And that's where I love the fact that we have so many entrepreneurial and innovative owners, frankly, and in a very productive way. They push at the same time. I mean, a good balance among 30 principal governors in the league. But I just think that I want to make sure that for this period in which I'm overseeing the league, we really really planted flags all over the world and pursued these enormous opportunities.
Yeah. Well, congrats. You're doing that, and thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for listening to this episode of On Stage. If you enjoyed this exclusive conversation with Commissioner Silver, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with colleagues or anyone who wants an unfiltered look at the decisions and strategies shaping the business of the NBA. As you reflect on what you heard today, consider this. How is your organization thinking about growth and innovation in a sports world where the consumption habits of the incoming generation of fans are rapidly changing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Shoot me a note at tbloom@sportsbusinessjournal.com. We'll be back next week with another exclusive conversation from a leader shaping the future of sports. Until next time, stay tuned and stay ahead. This is On Stage.